But you can't do this to me. You know how much I sacrificed?
I'm glad you brought that up. Do we really know how much he sacrificed?
I mean, I would love to have a backstory as to how much he has sacrificed to get to that point. That would be interesting.
I'm curious. Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to another podcast-style discussion with my good friend Arvid, aka Junkmaster3.
Hello everyone, what's up?
It's great to have you back on the channel as always, and in this video we'll be discussing the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, as well as sharing some notes that have surfaced online relating to the cancelled fourth film. But as we begin with introductions, Arvid, what is your familiarity with Spider-Man as a character?
So the first time I ever saw Spider-Man was on TV back in the day when I was probably just about like 3-4 years old. And I saw the animated show, like the animated 90s version, because that's used to air like pretty early in the morning, like back in the 90s. And I remember my mother said, like, "Oh, you can't watch this, it's too violent." And I'm like, no. And I was just really stuck with that. So I really grew up on that series in general and really enjoyed it. And that was like really my first experience of seeing Spider-Man on screen.
I do have a soft spot for that show. I always have vivid memories of the Morbius episode. It's Morbin time. Where he's chasing around looking for blood, obviously, but he's like absorbing blood through his hands, screaming, "I need the plasma!"
Yeah.
So bizarre. But I think my first introduction to the Sam Raimi trilogy was weirdly catching part of Spider-Man 2 on television. And it was the scene between MJ and Peter where they're discussing their relationship, only for Doc Ock to crash the party.
Oh, that's quite fascinating. The first time I ever heard about the Sam Raimi movies in general was when I played the, I think it was the very first, I think that it was just called Spider-Man, which was sort of like released on Xbox, GameCube, and PlayStation 2. And I believe like a friend of mine had it on GameCube, and he played it, and he was like somewhere on the end of the game when he had to face Goblin, and apparently he never really beat it because Goblin kept stomping on his stomach.
Well, I've never played any of the video games, but I do recall there being the first Spider-Man game on the original Xbox. Whether or not that holds up and it's worth a play, who knows?
Oh, no, I'll take the train.
No, I need the exercise. Go on, go.
I'm sure you'd be in agreement that with the first Spider-Man movie, the transformation of Peter Parker going from some kind of bullied geek stereotype, receiving the ultimate glow-up overnight thanks to the spider bite and everything that comes with that, I'm sure you'd say this is honestly one of the best on-screen origin stories?
Yes, definitely. Even though it differs a little bit from the original source material when it comes to his web, because in the original comic books, I believe he made his own webs through some sort of capsules in general. So I thought it was quite a fascinating take to basically have it within his arms, because I feel that's sort of something that Sam Raimi had his ideas with, because obviously he has his outing in previous horror movies and stuff. So I think that could be an inspiration to have it like that instead.
Yeah, I'd say so. I've never really understood that, but it does more so lean into the horror genre, which is something that just generally across the whole trilogy I really like. But I don't know if you've seen any of the other takes on Spider-Man, but luckily they do show him creating the little web shooter inventions in the Mark Webb movies and then in the MCU version.
I've only seen Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2. I've not seen anything after that, but that's actually one of the very few things in those movies that I actually did appreciate. So I thought that was very fascinating. But I mean, other than that, I mean, I'm just going to leave the other discussion for another time when it comes to those movies.
So I think we'll touch on those hopefully in another video. But the origin story, I mean, looking at it objectively, I will say I like how it combines obviously Peter Parker becoming Spider-Man, which is great, but I do really appreciate it as a coming of age style story.
It's sort of also the beginning before he gets to Spider-Man 2, which it kind of segues into the Spider-Man 2, when he has to combine his regular life and his life as Spider-Man. You get a little bit of a glimpse of that in this film, where they really improves in that regard for the second one once we get to that one. But I mean, in all honesty, this is an amazing origin story, and it's very relatable as well, especially if you've ever been that type of geek, because I think many people can relate to that.
Yeah, that's something that I'm glad you bring up, because with the way Tobey Maguire plays the character of Peter Parker, I do like how it's maybe played for laughs a little bit more so than you would expect or maybe appreciate, but the way he portrays that version of himself and how he's very dorky, but you can appreciate him for his good nature and stuff like that. I think that's really fun.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
I guess getting to the sad moment in the film.
I'm just still gonna say this, that this is the best Uncle Ben and Aunt May we're probably ever gonna have on screen.
I've never really seen a better on-screen portrayal of both characters that has kind of resonated with me in such a way.
Yeah, it's a very touching moment as well, especially when you see the when he sees him for the very last time, when he's like having this really deep talk with him, like, oh, he starts fights at school and you can't behave like this. And obviously, I mean, I kind of understand not Tobey Maguire, but Peter Parker in that scenario as well, because obviously he's just overwhelmed with all these new powers and everything that's happened to him. But I think it's a nice way that they also have small little glimpses of comedy within that as well, especially when Uncle Ben is saying something like, oh, Peter, you're changing, and I went through the exact same thing as in your age. And Peter's like, no, not exactly.
Yeah, it's a little bit too on the nose maybe, but that's just the cheesiness of this film that I do really like.
Yeah.
With the character of Uncle Ben, I really like how they share a lot of the sort of sentimental moments between him and Peter before obviously he ends up getting killed in that tragic incident, shall we call it.
And you can totally understand that they have a special bond to each other, especially, when I think this is just right when he runs down the stairs in that really weird fashionable way. And he says like, well, don't forget we're going to paint the kitchen or whatever. And Peter seems very happy about that. Like, oh yeah, I'm going to spend more time with quality time with my uncle, and they really look forward to that. And then he comes back home late, and he gets a little bit. I mean, you can sort of see that he gets a little bit. Oh, I should have been here. So, I mean, you totally understand that bond with these two characters.
Yeah, exactly. I like how they dedicate time to show us that angle, and then obviously when unfortunately Uncle Ben does end up getting killed, it hits a hell of a lot harder.
I think that's a thing which very many newer films doesn't really benefit in the same way, because you feel like newer films are very like rushed in a way just to get to the action bits or like the special effects bit, and they don't focus too much on the character development or the chemistry between the characters in general, which I think is a little bit of a shame.
Yeah, exactly. With this film, I feel like it takes its time. It's very nuanced in the sense of it really allows the on-screen relationship to grow. We see how the characters interact with one another at their highs and lows. And obviously that results in a more sort of poignant emotional sequence with the tragic death of good old Uncle Ben, rest in peace.
Peter. Over here, Uncle Ben. Out am I?
Norman Osborn, the villain in this film, played phenomenally by Willem Dafoe.
And his origin story is also very interesting to look at, because just like with many of these like villains, especially in the Sam Raimi trilogy, I mean, I'm not saying all of them, and most of them have very interesting backstories in general. And deep inside, they're not really bad people. They just have like really the worst case of bad luck, you could say.
Yeah, exactly.
You could totally understand the desperation from Norman Osborn, because he's about to lose everything, and he's willing to put his own like health at risk just to save his company, and like to get like this I think it's some sort of fund that he really wants to have that he's about to lose if he doesn't like come through with like a better like testing results and whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's a corporate psychopath in that sense. He's very narcissistic, very, very much self-indulgent in the respect of he wants to prove himself, but only to seek these sort of financial results for the benefit of keeping his name on the company.
Yeah, but at the same time, I can sort of understand him as well, because I mean, obviously he built this entire company, started the whole company, and it got successful. So obviously he don't want to lose that in that regard. Like it's his own little baby, you could say. Hence the reason why he reacts so drastically in that way when they have this meeting, when you get the infamous scene of, I started this company, you know how much I've sacrificed?
I'm glad you brought that up. Do we really know how much he sacrificed?
I mean, I would love to have a backstory as to how much he has sacrificed to get to that point. That would be interesting.
I'm curious.
But I mean, I totally believe him when he says that, though, because I mean, just based on the way he reacted when he said that,
it makes you wonder what shady ongoings have been happening for Norman.
And I would say the perfect example of that as to how great of an actor he is that scene when he talks to himself in the mirror, and you have this side of things where he's like still or Norman Osborn. He wants to do the good for people in general, and then you have the other like crazy one that got created in the lab accident, if you can call it that. And just the whole transition as to how it could like switch from that character to Norman Osborn is just really phenomenal.
It is. It really is a testament to how Willem Dafoe played this character, and I absolutely love the way it shows like that duality of like the evil within, and how you never really know like which side of him is talking at in some instances, which is kind of trippy.
But I think the real turning point when he really becomes full on, like he's just lost at this point, is when that whole meeting scene when they say you're out, Norman. And in that scenario, he's just completely lost everything, and he's just absolutely on this revenge path, and he just wants everything for himself. At that point, I feel Norman Osborn is probably long gone.
It's a fantastic origin story, and I feel as though that sequence in of itself and him like seeking revenge, petty as it may seem, it's so in character for him to go after those that wronged him.
All that aside, though, I still think, I mean, when we talk about some things that have been slightly dated, I always thought that not always, but I mean, at this point, I feel that the Green Goblin suit looks a little bit too cartoony in a way. It almost looks like he came out of like a Power Rangers episode.
I don't think it's too bad. I think, with the way he's been portrayed, like, I don't know how familiar you are with the way his character was seen in the most recent Spider-Man film from the MCU.
I have no idea about that, so you have to fill me in on that.
No, that's fair enough. So they kind of do away with a lot of his costume, including actually breaking the iconic mask that he wears in the original Spider-Man.
Oh, yeah.
And they sort of do like a weird sort of mismatch between like a newer costume where it's like a hood almost inspired by the comics, and then the rest of them is like sort of remnants of the body armor.
That sounds interesting, though. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And with that, I mean, I love the way he's portrayed in the film. I think acting-wise, Willem Dafoe gives it his all. I would say perhaps the standout sequence for me, surprisingly, that really heavily shows the duality of his evil persona and the man that's trapped within is his demise, where he ends up impaling himself on his own glider.
Yeah, in the crotch, nonetheless.
Exactly, that is a nasty way to go, but... No, in all seriousness, it's where we genuinely feel sorry for him, and it's as you were saying before, like these characters becoming basically like a victim of circumstance. Like, they're not bad people, they just do bad things.
But he's just so, I mean, it almost feels like, when he's really pushed to the edge, when he's almost defeated by Spider-Man, when he keeps like punching him every now and then, like over and over again, it feels at that point he realizes that he can't win that fight, and in that way there's still some small glimpse of hope within like his heart, but then he decides like just in the very end like to still be a Green Goblin.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like he uses almost that to his advantage, as though he tries to manipulate Peter with his good nature, and then that obviously turns around and bites him in the ass almost, or in this instance, the crotch, where unfortunately things don't go too well for him, and Peter doesn't fall for the tricks, he doesn't fall for the sob story, and, as we know, he impales himself.
Yeah, and obviously... Spider-Man also has those spidey senses that kind of like knew that something was off.
I love those shots and those scenes where it really gives you that comic book feel of how Peter is sort of tracking like certain noises or minor movements and things, like the camera will like zoom into his ear or his face or something, and it'll then show like his reaction to like one of the pumpkin bombs being thrown at him, for example.
Yeah. And one of my favorite scene of mine when it comes to that scenario is one of the very first instances when he uses the spider sense when he's fighting Flash Thompson in the high school, and he keeps like jumping away from his punches, and then there's like this small little instance of where you see like Flash like doing the punch like but in slow-mo, and you see like Peter Parker's like almost staring right into the camera like, is he really this slow, or is there something wrong?
I do love seeing him move in slow motion. One angle that I feel that we should cover that's more relevant to the entire trilogy overall is the love triangle between Peter Parker, Mary Jane, and Harry Osborn.
Yeah, which is almost a little bit forced to a certain degree as well, that they are, I mean, really, both of them feels that they're really obsessed with this girl from the get-go.
Yeah, it's like she's the only girl that kind of gives him some attention at the very beginning of the film before he's bitten by the spider, and he's always had like the crush on her. She's like the typical girl next door sort of thing.
Quite literally as well.
Exactly, yeah, which is even more appropriate. And yeah, I just kind of think it's funny how both Peter and Harry, they're pining after the same girl who isn't really all that great in my opinion.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, she does grow on me through this series in general, because I mean, in the first one, she just kind of feels like the love interest and not too much else in terms of her character. It doesn't really seem like she develops that much, other than that she just spends more time with both Peter and Harry in general after she dumps bully Flash. And I feel in the second one in particular, she just treats almost everyone really, really terribly, while in the third one it's really the other way around, when you sympathize more with her character and really despise Peter Parker's character.
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of 180 kind of turnaround, really.
I mean, you could call her like a damsel in distress in a way as well. You have a small little like background story to her, because she obviously has a terrible home life. I mean, she's been treated terribly by her father, like constantly. So maybe that is maybe the reason why she keeps like jumping back and forth between Spider-Man, Harry, and Peter, you could say.
I do like those scenes where she does kind of confide in Pete almost, but in a way it feels as though she's just using him. Maybe that's just me.
And I feel very sorry for Peter in a way, because he seems like he's really the victim of circumstances as well, because you know, when he encounters her when she's like working at this like shady diner, and she's really ashamed of herself that she's like working there, because she kind of lies to him and says like, yeah, I'm acting right now, I'm living my dream, and then she's just telling like, oh, well, don't tell Harry. And like, well, what is this all about? It turns out that she's dating Harry without even any of them telling him. I feel that is just a very bad way to like treat your friend or your love interest or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, she seems very indecisive about who she wants, what she wants. You know, it's a tricky character to kind of nail down across all three films.
Yeah, but I have a feeling that she really feels like she needs to be the more, have a much better job, just based on the fact that she's dating Harry, since Harry's father is very like wealthy and has a good job and probably earns a lot of money just based on that mansion. So I think that is the reason why she's kind of like ashamed of that. But at the same time, why would you date a person like that just based on that alone? It just feels very, like you said before, like we've said before, like really forced.
I would say so. And on that subject, I do appreciate how, with Harry in particular, we do see a lot of his friendship with Peter Parker throughout. I do like how close they are and how James Franco portrays the character. And with that, I in a similar extent, like doing a complete 180, I like how at the end of the film, after Norman's funeral, we see Harry have a pure hatred for Spider-Man, blaming him for his father's death.
And I think that's a very interesting scene as to how they put that together, since he says like, oh, I swear one day Spider-Man will pay. Thank God for you, Peter. You're the only family I have. And that really turns like the tables as to like what is going to happen in the next couple of films. That's a really nice way of like keeping the viewer on the edge of their seats, like, oh, I'm really like curious about the next films.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Yeah, I do really like that. It shows, in a way, unintentional guilt, like, or secondhand guilt that Peter feels, even though he's not to blame necessarily, but he can't bring himself to tell Harry the truth about what kind of a monster his father became by the end.
And that's the thing which this is really a little bit off topic here, but that scene when they speak about that in the third one, when this butler guy, I don't remember what he's like credited as, like the character, but when he just for some weird reason in the third one decides to tell Harry, well, the wounds that pierced your father was just, I mean, that was just his glider. I mean, that was, he died by his own hand. Well, why couldn't you just say that right away?
Yeah, I get the idea of like protecting Harry because obviously he very much respects his father and what Norman Osborn stood for as a person, and to kind of crack and ruin that sort of portrayal or figment that Harry wants to, or how he sees his father, it would be a shame to upset him in such a way. I guess that's the only real reason to tell the lie and obviously keep certain bits of information hidden from him.
Yeah. You know, it could sort of be like a similar thing. Like you could say they probably tried to like sort of like save him from like dealing with those feelings, probably. Sort of like a similar thing. This is a weird comparison perhaps, but the way Obi-Wan Kenobi tells Luke Skywalker about his father, like, oh, I mean, what I said is sort of true from a certain point of view. It's sort of like a similar thing, almost like a similar scenario with this story as well.
Intelligence is not a privilege, it's a gift. And you use it for the good of mankind.
But of course, moving on to what I would say is my personal favourite of the trilogy, Spider-Man 2.
And I totally agree with you on this one. I remember when I was a kid, I think I preferred the first one mainly because it had Willem Dafoe and the Goblin in it. But as I've grown older, I really think Spider-Man 2 is the best Spider-Man film, and I would almost say also as well that this is my favorite superhero movie of all time. But that doesn't say too much either, though, because I'm not a huge fan of superhero films in general. But there you go.
No, that's fair enough. I absolutely agree. This is my favorite. I'd probably say as well my favorite superhero movie of all time. It's incredible because I feel as though for a secondary chapter, it really builds on everything that was established in the first film and continues to see the character growth in particular, which I thought was fascinating.
And I would also say this one does an amazing job when it comes to like portraying both Peter Parker as still being a little bit awkward and still having like this life as Spider-Man, like trying to save people, because it felt very, I mean, obviously it's not realistic with a guy like flying around with like webs and whatnot, but I think this feels like the most like realistic superhero film as well, because obviously if anyone had like a life like that, people would just be torn apart. And I think that's a really amazing way of showing this in this film that Sam Raimi apparently I did an amazing job with that. And as a whole, I would also say Spider-Man is my favorite superhero because he just comes across like a regular guy. I mean, he doesn't have like a fancy car or like a fancy like mansion or anything like that. Like, for example, like maybe like Iron Man or like Batman has. I mean, he's just a regular guy trying to live his life, and I think that's very interesting to watch instead of just watching someone that already has everything.
And a big section of this film is watching Peter's personal life crumble. And
you constantly feel sorry for him as well, because obviously he doesn't want to tell MJ that he is Spider-Man from the get-go either.
He feels as though, I guess he feels like he has to keep it a secret to protect her, as cliche as that sounds, but you'd be surprised, I guess, and this is throughout the entire trilogy, how many times do people that are so close to Peter just end up sort of being victims inherently?
Yeah, that's another one thing that I would like to point out about this film. It almost feels like some people like kind of suspect that Peter Parker actually is Spider-Man. I mean, one example is the guy who works at the Daily Bugle with Jameson, you know, the what's his name, Bill Nunn, I believe the actor is.
Oh, I know who you mean. Yeah,
so he's really heartbroken, you know, once he realizes that Spider-Man's given up on his like Spider-Man like duties, if you will, and it almost feels like at one point as well, you know, when Peter Parker enters the Daily Bugle at one point, and he's pretty much says to Peter Parker like, oh, I heard Spider-Man was there, and he likes really staring at him like, oh, I have a suspicion that you might be Spider-Man.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, there is like a weird undertone to that, and with the Bugle generally, I love how at one point in the film they feel responsible for having gotten rid of Spider-Man.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting that even though as much as a narcissistic asshole that is John Jonah Jameson, he still didn't snitch on Peter in the first film. I think that's very something that we can really point out as well. I mean, he could have done that, but he still decided not to do that, which was still a little bit out of character for him.
Yeah, it's very unexpected, that level of loyalty, despite firing Peter at every opportunity he gets.
Yeah, just the fact that he's firing and then hires him like after 5 seconds again. That seems so hilarious.
Where were you? Photographing squirrels? You're fired.
Chief, the planetarium party.
Oh, right. You're unfired. I need you. Come here.
Peter loses his powers in the film. That's one of the more prominent overarching parts of the story. And with that, obviously, he hangs up the mask as Spider-Man and tries to focus more on himself and a faltering relationship with Mary Jane.
I mean, obviously, he tries to really like do the best in that situation, especially when it really gives up on the Spider-Man life. It almost also feels like he's really going to dedicate the rest of his life just to please MJ, basically.
And that doesn't work out. I mean, he's very much in many ways a people pleaser, but no matter what, he just can't seem to find that balance between himself, his duties, and obviously him as a student, as well as being Spider-Man, and all these things. It just doesn't work for him.
I also find it quite interesting. This is yet another trivia right here. The sequence where like there's an ambulance going on, or like police officers like running towards a specific location, and you see like Peter just like looking at the whole situation, and he's taking like a piece of like hot dog or like a hot dog bun. But you don't actually see like the sausage, but that's because Tobey Maguire decided to go vegan or like vegetarian for some reason.
The way he bites into that.
Yeah, so that's the reason why we all really see the bun and not like the sausage.
The raindrops keep falling on my head scene is one of my favorites.
But it ends a little bit weird though, because I remember, once I think that's right after he goes out of the classroom or whatever, and like Dr. Connor's saying like, "Oh, good work today, Parker." And then he just looks into the to the camera, and then it just freezes for like 2-3 seconds, and then it moves on. And then that scene, once like this song also ends, I almost thought for the first time when I watched this film, oh, is that the end of the film?
It's such a weird edit. That's where it cuts to the lyric in the song, "Nothing's worrying me," and it sort of fades out.
Yeah, I think that's so weird, because that really felt like almost like an ending type of thing. But at the same time, you're thinking, well, it can't really end like this. It's like, it decides to not be Spider-Man anymore, and that's the end of the film. Goodbye. Thank you for watching.
He's given up. The bugle has won.
Yeah.
I think with that as well, I mean, obviously some of the editing choices like that are perhaps unintentionally comedic. I mean, it's supposed to represent that now Peter is free of the burdens of Spider-Man and free from the stress of the relationship, and so he's focusing more on himself. But with that comes a lot of comedy, and I think the comedy throughout the Raimi trilogy is so spectacularly done.
Yeah, and it has really nice timing as well. It doesn't really feel forced in any way at all, especially when it comes, if you like compare it to some, like you can almost like compare it to like all newer like comedy films as well, when they constantly need to like tell you a joke and then have like a small pause of like 3 seconds they expect the audience to laugh at that point.
They're waiting for that Friends laugh track.
Yeah.
Which just doesn't work.
Yeah, and obviously these films understood that, and they had like these small little subtle funny like sequences that were not like forcibly like trying to get you to laugh.
Exactly. The standout comedic essence for Spider-Man 2 and parts of Spider-Man 3, in my opinion, all boils down to Peter's rent situation. He's living independently now with Mr. Dickovich, and what a funny character, not only for just being, a stereotype, but I love him as a character for what he represents towards the third film, and his daughter as well.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I think not many people like think about when they see some of those scenes, especially, the scene when she just randomly walks in and like offers him like chocolate cake with like a glass of milk. They don't really understand that scene. They just assume that, oh, she's really in love with Peter Parker. Like, she's just a friend that really wants to cheer him up in that point.
Well, I mean, that could have evolved. I mean, who would you choose, MJ or Cake Girl?
I mean, that depends on the situation, but I mean, yeah, why not Cake Girl?
you not only do you get cake, she offers you a glass of milk.
But you know what I mean. You know what I mean with that scene.
I do, of course, and with that, I mean, I think those kinds of characters help give Peter a foundation for not feeling as insecure where he's living and, you know, being able to deal with all of these very sudden changes in his life. And with those changes, that takes me to Doc Ock as a character.
Also a similar type of storyline, like a really like sad story, like in the origin story, you could say. He's just like a guy that wants to create like eternal like electricity or whatever. Like
he wants to change the world for the better.
Yeah.
He's looking to improve the world with, I believe he says, like an endless energy source or like clean energy, something along those lines.
And that obviously backfires on him and turns him into a villain just because of the chip that he has that controls the arms that just stops working. And yeah, obviously he's not really himself at that point. And that's also quite similar to the first villain in the first film.
Exactly. A running trope is that these characters become unintentional villains and really victims to circumstance. And the circumstance here is the AI tentacle arms that basically take over.
Yeah. And you also have the classic like Sam Raimi things in this one as well. Yeah, especially the scene when these, I believe they're supposed to be like doctors or something, that they're about to like cut off the arms, and then obviously you get like almost these horror type of sequences when the arms are basically just getting rid of all of these poor people.
The surgeons really do have it rough in that scene, and I love that one-liner where the guy has the saw and he just says, "Anyone take shop class?"
Oh, yeah.
So cheesy, and then obviously that entire sequence leans very heavily into the horror genre, and I feel the second film overall really does improve upon that from the first and really takes advantage of those kinds of sequences.
Yeah. I'm in total agreement with that.
With Alfred Molina playing Dr. Octopus, I'll be honest, I do kind of prefer him over Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin.
Do you think that's the way just because he feels like a more like regular, I'm not saying regular person, but like more like a...
I find him more relatable in that sense, since obviously he is someone that wants to do something for the greater good of mankind, rather than with Norman Osborn. He was more intently focused on proving that he should be part of his own company. He was very narcissistic and self-centered, and you know, he had his own sort of difficulties in that regard, whereas Otto, he was full of himself similarly, but he was so overly confident in his calculations with what he was doing.
Yeah.
And that's his downfall.
Yeah, I think that's another reason why I think many people prefer Doc Ock over Goblin generally, just because of that. One of the very last scenes with Doc Ock when basically Peter tells him that sometimes we actually really need to give up on the things we really want the most, even our dreams. And that's really like a callback to that dialogue that he had with Aunt May before. And I think that's such an amazing like piece of dialogue that he has with Aunt May in that scenario as well. Like kind of like comes full circle towards the end, you could say. So I think that's also like one of the main turning points as to why people prefer Doc Ock, because he kind of like redeems himself towards the end.
He does surprisingly have that redemption arc, and he really embodies that, you know, what the speech he delivers to Peter at the start of the film, that intelligence is a gift and should be used for the good of mankind. He finally comes back around to seeing that once again, and obviously with that, he sacrifices himself.
I always think as well, when we do like a little callback to that sequence with Aunt May and Peter Parker again, when she basically does, "Oh, I believe there's a hero in all of us." And that scene, I almost feel like maybe Aunt May actually knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, because she kind of hints at it like, well, everyone needs a hero. And she kind of looks at him like, "Oh, I know you're Spider-Man because you saved me."
Yeah, I honestly feel like it's not really something that is discussed at all in the film, but there are subtleties like that I would arguably say show that people know a lot more about Peter Parker / Spider-Man than they're letting on. But because they're so close to Peter and they respect him and all the above, they deliberately keep the secret as like an unspoken bond.
Yeah.
And with that, I mean, the train sequence, this is something I wanted to bring up. The train scene alone, the fight between Spidey and Doc Ock, I would honestly say is my favourite part overall in the trilogy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I love that fight sequence. It's just so... It's mesmerizing, really creative. There are moments where you don't know what's going to happen. There are moments where you think the fight is over, Doc Ock is back, and all these other things. And to top it off, I love the cheesy, looks like you've got a train to catch, throws the lever to Peter. The runaway train is at full speed.
At that point, he's just gone completely mad, hasn't he? Because, I mean, it feels like he just took that scenario for its own, just to, build on that, scenario, because it's like, well, I'm just gonna sacrifice all these poor people on this train now, and you're the one that's supposed to save them.
Yeah, he feels like, I guess his train of thought there, no pun intended, is that he wants that to be like Peter removed from the equation, so then he can go off and rob the banks, get the money, buy the tritium from Harry.
But does it really buys it from him though? Because he's like, he basically tells him like, if you get Spider-Man here to me, I'll give you all the tritium you need. That's basically what he says after he's like threatening him.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. There was a weird exchange. But the point I was getting to, though, is the fact of Peter's mask comes off towards the end of that sequence where he saves everybody on the train. And it's like a weird unspoken bond where all the New Yorkers unite for that one brief moment where Peter has saved the day and saved their lives. Surely one of them eventually would have said something.
But I think that could be sort of like a callback to the first one as well, especially the scene in the first one when I think Green Goblin is almost about to kill Peter when he's like in midair, and like these people on the bridge keep like throwing things towards Green Goblin at that point, like, are you actually gonna hurt Spider-Man? Like, and when he's trying to like save these bunch of kids on this bus or whatever. That's a scene,
the little cable car.
Yeah, so that's a scene where I know for a fact that they put in there because of the whole thing that, like, obviously which happened like after 9/11. They wanted to have like this scene because we New Yorkers, we stand up for each other, we really help each other out, and I think that's sort of like a thing that kind of continues in the first one and in the second one, in the train sequence when they say, well, we're not going to tell anybody about your identity.
I do love that, New Yorkers united. I didn't really think of that with the comparison to the first film. That's a really good point.
This came up. That came to mind.
Oh, that's good. And then obviously the way the film ends is with a brief cameo from good old Willem Dafoe in the Avenge Me scene.
Which, I mean, I don't really understand the connection in that way. I mean, obviously, it has to be some sort of hallucination, but I don't understand how he got that hallucination, because obviously, I mean, Green Goblin or Willem Dafoe, he was obviously, like, impacted by... Not impacted, but he was, like filled with this weird green gas, so that kind of explains as to why he had hallucinations, while Harry almost feels like he's hallucinating because of his pure revenge at that point.
Exactly, he's so blinded by his fury in that respect that he wants nothing but to get revenge on Spider-Man, and he kind of leans on his father's legacy and his father's downfall at that.
I think he decided to go full evil after that, just based on the fact that he kind of lost everything as well, because obviously he lost his father to which he thinks is Spider-Man, and then also he kind of like loses MJ as well, that she's obviously not interested in him anymore, so he kind of like loses most of the things that he really pressured in life.
Exactly, he's lost everything that meant something, and so he takes on the mantle of Little Goblin Jr.
Little Goblin Jr.
And of course... Oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I remember when I saw that scene for the first time, once Harry, finds the secret lair of the Green Goblin, and kind of, finds all the weapons and all the masks and whatnot, and he kind of zooms out, and you're like, oh, this is going to be a nice follow-up, this is going to be really interesting, and then it's like, well, we'll get to Spider-Man 3, but you know what I mean.
I do, yeah. It's we may as well move on, getting into Spider-Man 3. The film that was so bloated with so many villains that it really just impacted the whole film, and in my eyes, made it less than what it could be.
Yeah, I mean, focused way too much on action sequences, and like you said, too many villains. And obviously, I don't think we can blame Sam Raimi for this, because obviously the studio really pushed him towards this vision of this film in general, just to, I mean, let's be honest, just to sell toys.
I would imagine so. With all that in mind, I mean, Venom is the main reason why this film seemed to fail, and it's an unfortunate thing because I feel Venom as a character and the concept behind him and the symbiote and all that good stuff is great as a standalone piece because there's so much detail and nuance that you can pull from that. But for Spider-Man 3, not so much.
Yeah, they should have stick with. I mean, I think 3 villains for one film is just too much. I almost feel like 2 villains as well. It could be a little bit too much, but at the same time, I feel that could have worked if they just like stuck with Sandman and Gobby Jr. Instead, they probably could have like if they really. I mean, obviously, I think Venom is like one of the more popular villains in this franchise in general.
Yeah, that seems to be why they deliberately threw him in there.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see. I mean, obviously, this never happened, but I mean, instead of like shoving Venom like and shoehorn him into this film, they could have saved him for a potential 4th film, and then maybe add like Carnage. That could have been interesting if they had that like in a potential 4th film, but obviously that never happened. But that's the maybe like a sort of solution to this film's problem, because I mean I think that's the biggest issue with the film, and I know many people don't really like the transformation of Peter Parker, like going from like this sort of like heartfelt, like awkward teen to this really obnoxious, annoying character after he has this black suit on.
The weird emo kid at the back of the class.
Yeah.
It's such a shame because that's where I feel the comedy goes too far in a lot of areas, and it really detracts from the wonder and the heartfelt trajectory of what Peter's story is.
I think this film, even though it has lots of flaws, it still has that sort of core element to it. It has like a villain with a really sad backstory in Sandman, which I really appreciated. I mean, if they focused more on his character and used really threw the whole Venom bit out of this film, it could have been really cool, because I think that's something that's really lacking in the Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2. Like, there's not really any good backstory to the villains. They're just kind of there for the sake of being there. While in these films, even though Spider-Man 3 is the weakest in the trilogy, in my personal opinion, I think this one still has that core element that still drives the movie forward when it comes to those villains, especially Sandman.
Yeah, Sandman. I'll be honest, Sandman was probably my favorite part of this film overall. I really enjoyed the way Thomas Hayden Church portrayed that character that was down on his luck, and he becomes a villain outright just to get what he wants. And at the end of the day, all he wants is to save his daughter, who is terminally ill.
I think also this nice thing that they kind of like, they didn't really make him into a villain like just poof. I mean, that kind of was happening in the film, but you know, the scene once he's turned into sand and he tries to grab that photograph of his daughter, and he kind of fails the first like few times, and then he gets a hold of it. I mean, that's a nice way to establish like, okay, this is a guy that had the worst type of luck and turned into a piece of sandbag basically. And I think that's nice. Sort of like a small little backstory like that still helped the film forward, even though it's a very small scene, which I think that really lacks in the later films, because I mean that still explains that he doesn't really know about his powers yet, and he kind of like discovers them throughout the film.
Sandman's origin, that entire sequence, I believe, speaks volume for him as a character. There's no dialogue.
I totally understand your opinion on Sandman, that he's definitely one of the best parts about this film. One scene that I think is a little bit weird, I mean, this is just a smaller thing, but you know, the very first scene when Spider-Man and Sandman meets for the very first time, when he's like robbing that truck with like money or whatever.
Yeah.
And he said that line delivery, I think, is a little bit weird when he's like, "I don't want to hurt you. Leave now." I mean,
it's very wooden acting from Thomas Hayden Church in that regard.
Yeah, that's the only scene that I really feel is a little bit weird. Other than that, I think he did an amazing job in this film.
Generally, he's a great actor. He's very good in comedy, surprisingly. He uses that sort of wooden attribute to deliver humor very well.
Yeah.
If you've seen the show Tires, he's very good in that.
Oh, I'll need to write that down now.
Yeah, it's worth a watch.
I don't want to hurt you. Leave now.
Going back to the Sandman scene, I love the soundtrack and the music throughout that sequence, but I was surprised that Danny Elfman was replaced, since he actually fell out with Sam Raimi during the gap between the second and third film, so they got Christopher Young to replace him.
And that's something I never realized until you mentioned it for me, because I mean, obviously, I mean, I think Maybe because of the whole more darker aspect to the film, especially when with the whole like conflict between like the good Spider-Man and the evil Spider-Man that is Peter Parker in this film. And obviously Christopher Young is I know him basically from being the guy who scores the soundtrack for the first Hellraiser film.
Ah, well, that makes more sense. He's really good, though, I'll be honest. Obviously, they reuse a lot of the music cues that Elfman did in the first and second movies, but I genuinely really prefer Christopher Young's soundtrack to this third film.
Do you mean like as a whole, or do you mean just specifically for this film?
Maybe as a whole across the trilogy. There's obviously iconic moments that Elfman scored, but if I was to compare and just say which one I did enjoy more, then I'd honestly say Christopher Young's.
Yeah. He did an amazing job with the Grudge remake, the soundtrack to that one as well, which is really, really creepy.
I've not seen that. I'll have to give that a look in.
Yeah, and then at least look at the music to that. That's really, really creepy.
But with, obviously, we've covered most of the villains. With Harry, I feel there's a little bit more to explore there with his sort of toxic friendship kind of angle and the revenge plot and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, he is obviously more well-crafted as a character than Venom or Topher Grace is in this film as well, because obviously we've already seen the character of Harry Osborn in the previous two films, so we still have some sort of like background as to who he is and how he's behaving and whatnot. So he's still, I can sort of see his revenge coming like towards Peter Parker and Spider-Man eventually, while Topher Grace's Venom just feels like he's the real jealous douchebag in general, because I mean, the whole thing when it comes to him towards the end is just like, oh, you made me lose my girl, now I'm gonna make you lose yours. I mean, it just sounds like two 5th graders just talking garbage to one another.
It does genuinely come across that way. I don't really like Eddie Brock in this film. I just find him to be very much... He's just very awkward, and he's going out for petty revenge, and obviously the Venom opportunity gives him that.
Yeah, I have a theory about that as well, that, you know, whenever like he's showing up at the Daily Bugle, I believe there's like Elizabeth Banks' character, Miss Brandt, I believe her name is in the film.
Yeah.
I think that's the very first time when we hear that, when she basically says like, oh, what's that smell? Whenever like Topher Grace's character is entering the building, and that's exactly what Jameson says as well when he's entering that room. So it almost feels like maybe like Sam Raimi had something to do with that, like, oh, what's that smell? Because obviously he probably didn't like the fact that they included Venom in the film.
That was his own personal hatred creeping into the script.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I have a theory that could be the case, but I don't know. I'm not really an expert when it comes to all of the trivia, but that could be a theory.
No, I like that. That's quite fun. Of course, we agree that Venom as a character, very much a forced inclusion, as is Gwen Stacy, in my opinion.
I would say Gwen Stacy is only there to like put more fire on the woodwork when it comes to the relationship between Peter Parker and MJ, because they do pretty much do the same kiss scene which we had in the first film between Mary Jane and Peter Parker, and for some weird reason, I don't understand why, Peter Parker just goes along with it, like, oh yeah, just kiss me right away. I'm like, why in front of all those people? So she's really only there to be like a competitor almost to MJ, and obviously that she's also, I mean, Peter Parker is almost like a competitor to Eddie Brock in that scenario, in the other way around, and that it's just like you could have like erased both of those characters from this film, and we could have had a better film. Don't get me wrong, I think Bryce Dallas Howard as an actress is really good, and I think her character is well portrayed, but it just feels like that could have probably been in a potential 4th film instead of being shoved into this film.
Exactly so. It feels like a missed opportunity, especially with how good Bryce Dallas Howard is just generally, and the fact that she doesn't really get the opportunity to shine in this film. She just doesn't really belong.
Yeah, she's just there to add to like jealousy between the other characters.
Just literally just a catalyst for that exact reason. It seems such a shame to waste her.
Yeah. And speaking of that, we can also touch a little bit on emo Peter Parker, if you will, and especially the scene when he's going out with Gwen Stacy in front of Eddie Brock, when he's actually seeing them together, and for some weird reason he decides to go to the very same bar which MJ works at, and I have no idea why he was doing that.
You just get secondhand embarrassment from it.
Yeah, at the same time, it's a weak point of the film. Don't get me wrong, I do not like emo Peter Parker one bit, but at least it has some sort of like unintentionally funny sequences where it's just so over the top to the point you just can't help but laugh at it.
Yeah.
While Venom and Gwen Stacy's characters are just like, they're just kind of there, he's shoved in there. It's just a really big mess. That's the biggest issue with this film. But it's just the weird awkwardness to the scenes that kind of make it funny, even though I don't think it was meant to be awkward. I don't know.
I don't know really what they were going for, because, like we mentioned before, comedy in these films does surprisingly exceptionally well. But comedy gone too far, I'd arguably say, with the whole emo Peter Parker and that whole side of him that tries to find a way of representing itself, showing that he is now this sort of suave, confident kid, but everyone is repulsed by him.
I think I have a theory about that scene that I mentioned before. There could be a reason why he did that, because, I mean, obviously, probably because the writers didn't really know how Peter would eventually discover that he's just really wrong when it comes to his behavior when he is the Peter Parker version of himself. And that was like really the main reason why they decided to have that scene in there, just to make him doubt on himself, like what is he really doing there, like he's turned into a monster. And then obviously he realizes that right after he's hit MJ right towards the ground, and then he kind of like looks at himself like, what am I doing here? I don't know who I am anymore. I think that's the only reason why they even had that scene to begin with.
Yeah, it just, otherwise I don't really know how else that could work, if I'm being completely honest, because it just doesn't seem like Peter as a character, which I guess is the point. It's not meant to be him.
Yeah.
It's a variation of him, but it just does not work for the film.
The douchebag version of him, you can say as well.
Emo douchebag. What's your familiarity with the alternative cut, which is known as the editor's cut of Spider-Man 3?
Isn't that supposed to be very, very hard to come across as well, the editor's cut of that?
It is, yeah, so it's difficult to find. I was lucky to get it in a Blu-ray set, and it's slightly shorter than the theatrical cut, but it replaces some of the emo scenes and tries to tone that down in favor of Peter sort of like misunderstanding what the symbiote means to him. And I thought that was a better angle and maybe what they were going for initially.
So it kind of like almost like an extended version of that scene where he has Dr. Connors talking about the symbiote in general.
It kind of lays into that a lot more, in that Peter wants to understand, but he's going about it the wrong way by allowing himself to feel these negative emotions.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I would love to see that cut at some point.
Yeah, I could probably burn the disc and actually send it to you.
Oh, let's say that on your channel.
No, I'll cut that out, don't worry. And then with that as well, the novelization kind of acts as an extended cut, where there were so many extra scenes that were filmed for the movie that unfortunately made it just ended up on the cutting room floor. But the novelization does depict some of those sequences. For example, there's an interesting scene between Sandman and Venom where they decide to team up. That's a lot better than what we got in the theatrical cut of the film.
That scene as well feels very, very forced, especially because that's really, really out of character for especially Sandman. Because, I mean, obviously Venom, he's only after to get Spider-Man and just Peter Parker and all in general, because he's just a really, really, really jealous type of person in general and really terrible character as well. While Sandman is just like a guy that wants to get money to pretty much like care for his daughter. And then Venom's just like, well, together he doesn't stand a chance. You want to team up? And it's like, yeah. Like, why? What does that? How does that benefit you?
I hate that so much because it's just so unnatural.
Yeah.
Flint Marko as a character, it doesn't work for him. And I'd honestly say that with that, it just comes across as very clunky with the structuring of the story.
I feel they focused on the wrong things, and there's some things they could have explored even more. I believe there's I'm not sure if this was like in the editor's cut or not, or if it's just like cut all together, but there was like some scene with the sandcastle, I believe, where he kind of visits his daughter or something, like Sandman.
It is, yeah. So that's, I'd say, perhaps the most famous deleted scene that does make it into the editor's cut, and I'm astounded that did not make it into the theatrical version, because it's such a heartwarming sequence where, even though unfortunately Sandman cannot be with his daughter because he's on the run, in a way he's still with her as this giant whimsical castle.
I mean, they should have focused more on those scenes than doing a weird extended thing with the emo Peter Parker dancing around.
I really wish they'd just cut all that out and just focused on the characters at hand and just prioritized Sandman in particular. Another thing as well it'd be interesting to get your opinion on is the retcon featuring Sandman in the flashback of Uncle Ben's death.
Yeah, that's a nice thing that you brought that up, because I almost completely forgot about that. I feel that scene also is, I mean, I understand, okay, the reason why I believe they decided to just have that scene in there, it's just for Peter Parker to add to the rage of the death of Ben Parker, and he needs to have some sort of like other reason to chase Sandman down instead of just being like a regular type of burglar or like thief in general. And at the same time, I understand the reason why they did that, but at the same time, it kind of ruins the entirety of the first film, where we believe that the real burglar, the thief that he was just letting go with the money, was the real killer. And then for some weird reason, they just decided to shove this into the Spider-Man 3 film, and it's very, very lazy, and it's very, very like clumsily made in that regard.
I agree.
But at the same time, I can sort of understand what they were aiming for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they were obviously trying to tie it all together and give Peter a reason to personally go after Sandman, and I guess that kind of works with the revenge stuff, and obviously wanting to dive deeper into these darker feelings when he becomes the Black Spider-Man. Or Black Suit Spider-Man, should I say.
I just thought you was gonna be black. Oh man, I'm sorry.
But the trilogy sadly does not end on a high note, which is really disappointing. But I've got some notes together for what could have been the cancelled now Spider-Man 4.
I'd love to know more about that, because I think you might have said at one point that you had more information about this.
Yeah, it's something that I made a video a few years ago looking just the entirety of all the Spider-Man films released theatrically, and I touched on some of the cancelled projects, and I decided to look deeper into Spider-Man 4, and I've put together a list, so I'll read through these and then we can just discuss them as we continue. So the first point, which I thought was an interesting establishment considering what these characters go through in the trilogy. Peter and MJ, they split up.
Interesting. Especially when you come to like the entire like rocky relationship between all these three films.
Yeah, so it kind of makes you think, well, was it worth it? You know?
Yeah, because you also have to remember, like towards the second film, or like towards the end of the second film, MJ just kind of like decides not to marry that other guy. And then towards the end of in the third film, she's still not married, so we never know.
Exactly. It seems really counterintuitive to the journey that they go on as a couple, and it's almost a will they, won't they. But obviously, if this had come to fruition, I don't think they would have. So they, unfortunately, as their relationship expires, it's interesting how a new love interest is then introduced, being Felicia Hardy, also known as the Black Cat. If you're familiar with that character,
is that some sort of like reference to almost like Catwoman in the other universe?
I don't know whether or not she'd be like the Catwoman equivalent, but she is a thief, and I only really know her. I believe she was a prominent figure in the PlayStation 4 game.
I'm not too familiar with all of those other like villains in general. I mean, I mainly like remember the ones from the Sam Raimi movies in general, but I mean, I don't think I've ever heard about Black Cat before. I'm just gonna be honest.
No, well, no, that's fair enough. So as a character, I feel like her introduction would have been interesting. Weirdly, in the Amazing Spider-Man movies, I believe Felicity Jones was going to become Black Cat eventually. I think she only got a couple of minor scenes in the sequel, but that was obviously never followed up.
Yeah, for good reasons, I assume.
And then with obviously introducing her as a potential villain, there was going to be a montage of secondary villains introduced, and there's a little list here of what those could have been. So we have Shocker, who was featured in one of the MCU movies, Rhino, who we obviously know from The Amazing Spider-Man, the Prowler, who was one of the main villains in the animated Spider-Verse movie, which I don't believe you've seen.
Yeah, I've not seen that.
Stiltman, who I was not familiar with that name at all, but he's a guy on stilts, apparently.
It sounds a little bit silly to me, but I don't know.
And then the most intriguing and the one that likely would have got the most screen time in this montage, Mysterio, played by good old Bruce Campbell.
Now that I can totally understand. I mean, that would actually be somewhat interesting because I mean, like you said, I assumed when you said that they were going to introduce all of these other villains, were you assuming that there were going to be all of these characters in the fourth film?
Yeah, so apparently, from what I can understand and from what I've read, it was going to be like a montage of all these secondary villains being like caught or captured, showing that Spider-Man is still your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man going after all these characters.
But wouldn't you think that would also be sort of like an issue with the film when you have so many characters, though?
Well, they wouldn't be a mainstay. So we're going to get to the main villain, which I personally think is super interesting. But it would just be like a secondary thing, as maybe like a bow out sort of situation where they show these characters, they exist in the Raimi universe, but they obviously don't get the appropriate screen time as main villains.
Oh, it's almost more like a weird introduction as to like, oh, these people are around and you might see them in upcoming films.
Exactly. It kind of makes me think of how Dr. Connors, obviously we know he would eventually become the Lizard, and that was something that they thought about for a potential 5th or 6th movie, but obviously he doesn't have that prominence.
And I think Lizard in general is not very... I mean, it's interesting enough, but I mean, I wouldn't necessarily maybe say it's the villain I would have picked for a potential 4th film.
Yeah, exactly. He seems kind of cheesy, but with the main villain for the potential Spider-Man 4, we have, interestingly, the Vulture, played by John Malkovich.
Now that I can totally see would work, because I think Vulture is maybe a little bit underrated in that entire universe in general. And then obviously I'm referring to like the older things like animated shows and stuff like that I've seen before.
Yeah, with Vulture as a character, I feel as though he's kind of underrated, but he does luckily get some representation on screen in the MCU, which I feel as though that was kind of the vibe that was perhaps inspired by this cancelled film, with Michael Keaton portraying that character later down the line. John Malkovich playing Adrian Toomes / the Vulture, he would have been the main villain, and maybe that would have delivered like a darker tone to the film.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they would have had some really like guts to do that. I don't think they would have done that, to be honest, because I mean, it almost feels like these movies in general, especially like the later ones, almost seems like they lean more towards the comedic parts of things than like serious type of character development or like interesting like brutal scenes and whatnot.
And with that, with Adrian Toomes as the Vulture, played by Malkovich, I believe interestingly as well, Malkovich actually turned down the role of the Goblin for the first movie. I didn't know if you knew that.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, he was apparently he was offered the role and he declined it, which, you know, that's his prerogative, I suppose. He's missed out on a good few millions.
Yeah, but I mean, it's good that he did that, because otherwise he wouldn't have gotten Willem Dafoe.
Exactly. I think, honestly, that's for the better.
Yeah.
But with that, so Adrian Toomes, he takes over the Daily Bugle, so that's goodbye to J. Jonah Jameson.
Oh, wait, takes over? Like, that character?
Yeah, so he would then be running the Daily Bugle.
Well, is he just going to fire J. Jonah Jameson? Is that what you say?
I don't think there's much depth as to how he acquires the Bugle, the Daily Bugle paper, but he takes over, apparently.
I have no idea how they would have portrayed that on screen.
Exactly. I don't know if that's like a comic book story that they could perhaps draw ideas from, but apparently that happens anyway. And then in a fight between Spider-Man and the Vulture, so Vulture would then successfully unmask Spidey, see that it's Peter Parker. Bear in mind, Peter's still working for the Bugle, but he goes in for the kill anyway. Peter fights back and manages to kill the Vulture, and Felicia Hardy, who is meant to be Black Cat, sees all of this go down and is revealed to be Vulture's adopted daughter. That
could work, but at the same time, I have no idea how they would portray like Spider-Man killing off the Vulture, because I mean, in all of these other Spider-Man films, he doesn't really go in for the kill. It's usually just trying to just take them out and then put them in prison, basically.
Yeah, so it's kind of a darker idea that he would go as far as killing the Vulture unless it was some kind of contrived accident, who knows, but with that, rather than Felicia Hardy becoming Black Cat, instead she apparently would become the Vultress.
Oh, so almost like taking over from her father's like legacy in a way.
Exactly, so she would then defeat Spider-Man in battle but doesn't kill him, and no one really knows what the idea for the ending would be beyond that, but Sam Raimi supposedly saw these ideas in a script ready for shooting, and he just didn't like it. He just couldn't get it to work for him.
Were they still like plans to still have Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man at that point, or did they actually think of just like replacing all these other actors from the previous films?
So they would have, even though I believe Kirsten Dunst and Tobey Maguire, they signed on for a 3-picture deal. Even with that, they still were going ahead with the 4th film, but obviously that's where pay rises get discussed and all the above. But with that, a reboot was secretly in the works, apparently, behind Raimi's back. And since Raimi couldn't get this 4th film to work no matter what he did, he then respectfully gave his blessing before then stepping away from the franchise and said, you know what, go ahead Sony, you reboot Spider-Man.
Well, that's a good choice, because I mean, I feel like the producers have already messed a little bit with Sam Raimi already at Spider-Man 3, so I kind of understood like they was kind of fed up with that entire scenario in general.
Exactly. There was so much meddling and so many issues that I do respect Raimi and his craft for being the bigger person in this situation and having that integrity to say, you know what, I hold my hands up. I can't get this to work. The studio meddling is too much. I'm going to walk away.
Yeah, there's only so much you can do as a director, because obviously it really comes down to the producers and like the bigger companies, what they really want to do with the end result in the end, which is still a bit sad from time to time.
Exactly. I mean, I still have hope that maybe one day, it's very unlikely, but we could get some kind of 4th Spider-Man movie set in that universe. I always envision it to be similar to Logan, if you've seen that film, where it's like almost like a legacy follow-up, where we see a much older, darker, battered style of the character we once knew.
I've not seen that one, but I totally understand the point that you said when it has the darker tone. That could be really cool. I'm just sitting here as a full-blown horror fan. I just want Sam Raimi to go back to horror movies.
Exactly. If only.
Yeah.
But to wrap up this video, I'm going to ask Arvid for your ranking of the Raimi trilogy, all 3 movies.
Yeah. So if you ask the younger me, I would have placed it like in the order like 1, 2, and 3, like they are. But as it is right now, then I'm probably still gonna stick to this opinion. I'm gonna say Spider-Man 2 is the best one, number 1. And I highly doubt there's ever gonna be a superhero film or a Spider-Man film, if you get in that case, to actually top this one off, because I think this is such an amazing film. Spider-Man, the first one, comes in at number 2, and obviously Spider-Man 3 is the weakest of the series, and I almost feel like that's a fact, but at the same time, that's just my opinion.
I think many will agree with that, and I'll be completely honest, I match the ranking that you have in that respect. I think nothing beats the second film.
Yeah.
As a superhero movie, I think it is just the pinnacle of what to expect and what most superhero movies should strive for when it comes to character building especially. The first film, I absolutely love that movie. It's a phenomenal origin story. And then the third film, although disappointing, it does have its good points. Yeah.
I mean, all that aside, I mean, I would still say, I mean, even though we've sat here and kind of bashed a little bit on Spider-Man 3, I still don't think it is a terrible film. It's just very weak in comparison to the previous 2. So I still enjoy watching Spider-Man 3 from time to time. So I still like the film, though.
Anyway, that's going to do it for this collaboration video as we go through the entirety of the Sam Raimi trilogy and what could have been Spider-Man 4. Arvid, do you want to plug your channel and what you've been up to as of late?
I usually make horror-related videos, like where I talk about horror movies, horror reviews, collection overview I made it quite recently, and just movie-related stuff in general. So if you're into that, please visit my channel if you want to, and subscribe or like my videos. So I'm not going to force anyone to subscribe, so if you don't like my content, please don't subscribe to my channel.
Well, by all means, check out Arvid's channel. I'll put a link to him down below in the description. And hopefully, once you have seen some of the more recent Spider-Man movies, perhaps we'll do a continuation and see where we go from there.
Yeah, sounds like a good plan, and thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, thank you, folks, for listening to our video. That sounds weird.
Yep.
Thanks.
Listening to the video.
Yeah, listening to a video. Thanks, everyone, for listening to this video. I hope you did enjoy. Please do leave us a like down below. Let us know in the comments what is your ranking for the Spider-Man Sam Raimi trilogy. As always, we love hearing your thoughts and opinions. And for more content, be sure to subscribe.
Yep. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Are you threatening me?